Good evening, guys. It's Joshua Klein here again, your host of the Draft Beard podcast. And tonight we're going to be recapping another division in the NFL and their draft. And that's going to be the AFC South. And with that, we give my favorite classes to least favorite. So my favorite class of this division was the Indianapolis Colts. Then we went down to the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Houston Texans, and last but not least, the Tennessee Titans. Now, I will tell you, this draft, none of the draft classes are really my favorite. I think all of them in the bottom half of my overall top 32, which you'll see a recap of that down the road. So that we're going to get started right now, and that is going to be with your Tennessee Titans. If you're a Titans fan, sorry about that. They had a kind of a miscue, I think, at the beginning of the draft, going with a right tackle and J.C. Latham. I did have a first-round grade on J.C., but obviously with some other tackles that I liked better sitting there with Troy Fautanu sitting there, Fashionow, both of them on the board, and you went with J.C. Latham over those at pick 7. Surprised maybe you couldn't have traded down. Probably still could have got J.C. Latham if you traded down. Maybe get one of those teams who are looking for a quarterback to move up, or maybe another team looking for a tackle that would have taken some of the tackles that you didn't like. That's probably what I would have done there. But you got yourself a right tackle in J.C. Latham, and then Trevondre Sweat. Not that I don't like the player, second round pick 38. You know, he is a mammoth person, just a mammoth man. He's really going to be a run-stuffing defensive tackle. He does have pass rushing abilities, right? But he's not going to be a 3-down player. And to use a second round pick, 38th overall on Trevondre Sweat, especially knowing some of the issues with Trevondre, with having a DUI in the draft process just before the draft, and using a top 38 overall pick on Trevondre was pretty questionable and puzzling. And then you didn't have a pick in the 3rd round. They did have a 4th round pick, Cedric Gray at 106. I like him as a developmental linebacker. He can cover. Really like his game. Javaris Brownlee Jr., the corner out of Louisville, 5th round pick at 146. He's a good nickel cornerback. I really like him. He's very feisty, man. You watched him. He did really well in the Senior Bowl, had a very good pre-draft process. So I think you got yourself possibly a nickel corner there. Cedric Gray could develop into possibly a starting linebacker with some good coverage ability. I think I'm a flyer on Jaquan Jackson, the wide receiver out of Tulane's. Great value in round 6. I am not a fan of James Williams. I did not have a draftable grade on him. He's a safety linebacker. I did like Jalen Harrell out of Michigan. I had a borderline 7th round grade on him. He's just going to be a guy as a situational pass rusher that you can put out there, a special teams player. But overall, I really think you really only got one true starter in this draft, and that's J.C. Latham. And you could have got a better one. You know, I'll defer to Brian Callahan, the offensive coordinator there. He knows more about football, probably in my pinky finger, than I do anything. So he's the guy that they wanted. Hopefully it works out for them. Not sure that analogy works that well, but you get my point that who am I to criticize J.C. Latham and the pick there with Brian Callahan? But, you know, that's kind of what I do. I love looking at the draft, and I'm just a little draft nerd who offers my opinion. So, and overall, not one of the greatest classes in the draft. Would have liked to have seen some more impact talent, more impact starters. Definitely could have done better with pick 38, and maybe getting a little bit better wide receiver instead of going with Jaquan Jackson. But overall, kind of a disappointing draft for the Tennessee Titans. I don't think they got the value that they needed. Next on, we'll move on to the Houston Texans, one of the upstart teams in the National Football League. They've had quite the offseason. They've really upgraded their team in free agency. They didn't have a first-round pick, one they traded last year with the Arizona Cardinals, and then they also had another first-round pick that they did get from Cleveland. They traded down from the first into the second so the Vikings could move up. They did get a second-round pick next year, so they didn't have a first-round draft pick. They really didn't capitalize on the value. I don't know if I would have really done that trade. I don't know what they really view as getting out of that trade. Maybe they view next year's draft class as a little bit better than this year's draft class. But in the second round, they had 2 second-round picks. They took Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia. I liked him. He was I believe my top 7 corners in the draft. He doesn't have the athleticism that you would hope out of a cornerback, but I think he can play his zone very well. I think he can play man, I think he's going to do better in zone and quarters coverage, cover 3, cover 2. I think that's going to be more of his game. I do like him. He's a really good football player. So I think they got a starter in Kamari Lassiter. He's not a CB1 type of person. He's definitely a CB2. Blake Fisher is a developmental tackle out of Notre Dame. I think that's a decent pick. They don't need a starter right away. Blake Fisher, he has some high upside. So I like him. And then Kalen Bullock, the safety out of USC. He's probably more of a true cornerback than a safety in round 3 at pick 78. And then you get Cade Stover out of Ohio State. And then the rest of the draft is kind of meh. Jamal Hill, the linebacker out of Oregon. Jordan, the running back out of Louisville. Stollenberg, the edge out of USC. I had very, very late day 3 grades on those guys. So not necessarily anybody that I see developing into being anything more than maybe some special teams contributor. Marcus Harris has a developmental side, a D tackle. I actually like the other Auburn defensive tackles a little bit better. And Ladarius Henderson, you can't go wrong taking a shot on the dartboard, getting a Michigan offensive lineman with the way they've been developing when Jim Harbaugh was the head coach there and Herbert was the strength and conditioning coach. Overall, I think they got maybe one starter out of this class that maybe you could see the field this year, and that's Kamari Lassiter at Georgia. Everyone else, they're going to be depth pieces, developmental pieces, so not something that really made an impact for the Houston Texans in this year's draft class. Then we get Jacksonville, and it looks like another typical Trent Baalke draft, going with high upside players, athletic attributes. In round 1, I like the pick of Brian Thomas Jr. I really do. I was kind of up and down on where I wanted to put him this year, but eventually I kind of had him in a tier out on his own. So I had your top 3 receivers, and Thomas was just alone in tier 2, and then the ones below that with McConkey and Pearsall and Smollers in tier 3. So that's a good pick for them. They're going to go to a more vertical offense, so that was a really good first-round pick. And acquiring assets on top of that, moving down with Minnesota, so Minnesota could take Dallas Turner, I think that was a good move for them. And then they kind of screwed it all up by taking Mason Smith. I am not a fan. I just don't see the production that he had in college. He's got all the talent in the world. He's not lived up to the 5-star recruit that he was coming into college. Going to take some development. This is exactly kind of what Jacksonville does with Trent Baalke and his style. He's going to take the athletic guy with traits and kind of see if they can coach him up and get him where they want to be. Jarian Jones, I'm a fan of his. Good nickel corner. Picked in the 3rd round. Can't really nitpick. Ran a 4th round grade on him. Javon Foster, a good swing tackle, developmental tackle with a lot of experience. So there's some hope there that maybe he can develop into maybe an average starter, but I kind of see him more as a swing tackle. Jordan Jefferson, again, bigger guy. I actually liked Wingo, his teammate from LSU. I would like that pick a lot better for them. And then you got DeAndre Prince and Keelan Robinson, the running back from Texas, and Cam Little, the kicker, staying with the kicker. And of course, then with Miles Cole, the just absolute athlete with no position, the possible edge rusher out of Texas Tech. Totally a Jacksonville draft. I don't know how many starters currently they're going to get out of there. Maybe 2. I think Jarian Jones could really contribute in dime packages as a rookie. He is really that inside slot corner. Brian Thomas is going to be hopefully a really good player for them as they look to stretch the field with Trevor Lawrence. So not an overwhelmingly great draft either. That's why I have everyone in the NFC South in the bottom quarter of my top 32. And then the Indianapolis Colts, that's where you get to them. And they had a really good pick with the very first defensive player off the board, and that's Laiatu Latu. They must view his medicals as not to be that big of a concern. He is the most accomplished pass rusher entering the draft. He is just got all of the pass rush moves that you look for. He's not the greatest athlete, but he is in that first tier of defensive edges with Latu versus Turner. So I think it was a phenomenal pick by Chris Ballard and the Indianapolis Colts. 2nd round, Adonai Mitchell. I am not high on Adonai Mitchell at all. Not the off-field stuff that people talk about. It's more the on-field taking plays off kind of thing. I don't see how that really will translate from college to the NFL. I don't want my players outwardly saying that they take plays off. But they drafted him in round 2. He is a boomer bust guy. He has all the potential in the world to be like an impact wide receiver. But will he put in the work? Will he do what he needs to do? Hopefully he does. For Colts fans, hopefully that works out for him. Round 3, Matt Gonzalez out of Pittsburgh. kind of was all over the board with my evaluation on him. Some people were really higher on him. I was kind of incomplete. I didn't have him as a 3rd round grade, kind of in like 4th, 5th round grade, but I do see the potential there. It's just he had the injuries last year. So they went with Matt Gonzalez, a tackle. Tanner Bortolini, huge upside, big athlete, liked him a lot as a center. Anthony Gould, the smaller wide receiver out of Oregon State. And then the rest of their drafts kind of with Jalen Simpson and Jamal Charles out of Missouri. They get 2 safeties, Simpson being this little thin rail type of guy. Overall, they did have the best draft in the NFC South. They got a very unbelievably impacted defensive edge in Latu. I mean, if you're a Colts fan, you got to be ecstatic that you landed him, because I think he's going to come in and possibly contend for Defensive Rookie of the Year next year. But the rest of their players, they're going to need some development. I think Bortolini down the road could be a starting center guard. We'll see with Gonzalez. But the rest of the class kind of, nobody really impactful from rounds 3 through 7. Maybe some developmental guys. But it's really, your opinion probably is totally different. If you like Adonai Mitchell, then you're probably going to move them up your rankings. Me, not being a fan of Adonai, I really want guys who are going to give it their all and give it their all 100% of the time. Eat, sleep, breathe football. Not sure that that's Adonai Mitchell's game, but the polar opposite with Latu, he is the exact opposite type of player. So with that is my rankings here, my little recap of the AFC South. Overall, the 4 teams had very below average classes, I think, as a whole. The Indianapolis Colts, I think, had the most impact with getting Latu. So that's why I have them at the top. And then I do see the potential in Adonai. So that's why the Colts are there with the best in the class in this division. But none of them really broke out of the top quarter of my 1 through 32 rankings. So with that, we'll see you next time on the Draft Beard podcast as we recap another division in the NFL.
The Draft Beard Podcast.